Harimi, harimi, al tirai, harimi, al tirai. Imri le'arei Yehuda, hinei Elokeichem. Harimi, harimi, al tirai.
Okay, we're on page 164 in the bilingual edition, which is Siman Ayin Vav in the Simanim of Rav Chaim Friedlander. So for those of you who were not here last week, and for those of you who were here last week, including myself, I think it's good to just review what we talked about last week, because it's very deep stuff we're learning here. Daas Tevunos is a very, very deep sefer, and it's a fundamental sefer. As I just mentioned Rav Aaron Feldman, so he encouraged me very much to learn this sefer, learn this book, and he studied it with us in yeshiva, because it has a lot of fundamentals of Judaism in the sense of, people go into religion, they want to learn about religion, they want to know what we're doing here, where are we going, and that's really what this sefer is about. We learn there's a very important basic ideas of where we're coming from. So last week we talked about the difference between the body and the soul, and we're going to continue that idea this week. But what we talked about last week and the week before was that the body and soul are really opposites. It's this body is a lowly creation. We share in common with animals. It's really a physical creation, and then we have a soul, which is a very lofty, holy creation, which wants to get close to Hashem. Animals don't have this. Now, we said that the soul is so powerful that if it was able to exist with its full force, then it would just automatically overpower the body, and we would just be like these spiritual, angelic beings. So what Hashem made is that where we're in this world, Olam Hazeh, He made a rule that the soul is constricted by the body. Now, what we do in this world, when we do mitzvos, we add holiness to the soul and we elevate it. And what's the point? The point is that after Tchias HaMesim, after the resurrection of the dead, then those restrictions which were placed on the soul will be taken away. That when the soul re-enters the body after the resurrection of the dead, and what we call Olam Haba, where we get our reward, then the soul will be able to affect the body to its full power and will totally purify the body until we do become those angelic beings. The reason that it's restricted now in Olam Hazeh, in this world, is also that we have free will. We have a choice to do between good and evil. Because if the soul would just go into the body and we'd be these angelic beings, we would just be here in the JLC studying Torah all day, and we wouldn't have any desire to do evil or anything to do anything wrong. So that's really what we discussed last week. Now, the Ramchal is going to talk about, in a certain sense, how I don't want to say the method, the way, in a sense, that God created the body versus the way He created the soul. And he's going to go, he's going to go into that. Amar Haseichel, Siman Ayin Vav. After we learned about the aspects, the different parts of man, Ben Benishmaso, Ben Begufo, we learned about the body, we learned about the soul, Bechilof Ha'itim, V'Seder Hazmanim Shehuchkalo, and the different time periods like we just discussed, Olam Hazeh versus Olam Haba, the different jobs of the body and the soul and what's going to be the strongest. Also, in Derech Hashem, the Ramchal says, he might say here also, that really, we're in a world that's totally physical and related to the body. It's very difficult for us to, most of our day is spent in mundane tasks, going to work, eating, drinking, and we just try to infuse it with spirituality as much as possible. And then there are certain times and places that have an infusion of spirituality where we don't get lost and totally overcome by the physical. For example, Shabbos. Shabbos is a day where there's an infusion of spirituality where we can connect more to Hashem. It's easier for us to connect to Hashem, so we don't get totally subsumed and overtaken by the physicality. But in general, we are in a world where the body is supreme and we are involved in mundane tasks most of the time. Okay. We have to know how Hashem deals with the body and the soul in all of these times, whether it's with the body, whether it's with the soul. Amar Hanashama, says the soul. Haseder Hagun Vade, this is definitely a good order to teach me. Everything has to be taught in the proper place, in the proper form. You see, the Ramchal, the way he does this, he's having a conversation, but he's building up on principles, step by step, because these are very deep, profound principles. So he's going step by step, so we don't get too overwhelmed at once. Ata hashlam nas devarcha. Now, please, says the soul to the intellect, please finish your words, what you were talking about. Amar haseichel re'i yesh ha'atzamim hagashmiyim va'atzamim haruchanim. There are physical creations and there are spiritual creations, and like we mentioned, the human being is really the only being in creation, a human that has both physical and spiritual. We mentioned animals are really just physical, despite what Peter might say, but they're really just physical. Angels are just spiritual.
Well, Peter agrees. They just say humans are also just physical.
So I was giving them more credit. I thought they said animals had a neshama, had a soul, were holy. That's a good point. Okay. But that's why we say in Asher Yatzer, we say umafli lasos, that we say it's a pella, it's a wonderment. A human being is a wonderment.
Where do we say this?
Oh, the Ramchal doesn't say this, but we say the Ramah says this in Asher Yatzer.
No, what prayer is this?
Oh, umafli lasos. Right, Asher Yatzer. After we go to the bathroom, we say Asher Yatzer, and we say one of the phrases in Asher Yatzer is umafli lasos. That it's a pella, that it's a wonderment that Hashem made us like this, because that we have these two opposites, the body and the soul, which are really don't have much in common, but He put it together, and we have that. Okay. Look how much of a difference there is between these two things, between the body and the soul. The physical is for sure very lowly compared to the spiritual. The spiritual is very high up, very elevated. See how much light, spiritual light there is by spiritual things, and how much darkness and deficiencies there are in physical things. You see here there are two types of creations. Bria beha'ara rabba v'hashpa meruvachas. We have creations that have a lot of light. He says here a powerful creative force. Okay. Ubria beha'ara mu'etes v'hashpa ma'etes. And there are creations that have a small spiritual force and a little bit of hashpa, a little bit of light, spiritual light. Ushtei midos elu, midas habria beha'ara, midas habria below ha'ara. And these and the creation with the light and the creation without the light. Midas ha'ara. Now, what is the creation with the light? Mitodas chok tuvahu, midas habria below ha'ara, mitodas helam tuva. Now, so he says that the creation with the light, that comes from Hashem's goodness. Okay. Midas habria below ha'ara, and the creation without the light comes from Hashem hiding His goodness. V'tira ki aruchanim kol askam b'divrei kedusha. The spiritual, all the spiritual beings want to do is be involved in holiness, right? Studying Torah, doing mitzvos, getting close to Hashem. Achagashmim, but the physical, and yanehem and yanei chol, they're just interested in mundane things. Udvarim shvalim v'nivzim, and lowly, embarrassing, lowly business. V'nimsa shekol klal amal ha'adam tachas hashemesh ena ela havel avalim. And it comes out that a human being that we said has a body, most of what he's doing in the world related to the physicality is just meaningless nothingness. Umoser adam min behema ayin. And really, kind of like Peter saying, if you just go after the body, he doesn't have much difference than an animal. Lachav alishtos, he eats and drinks. V'sa'aretz yischaru, and he does business. Hein kol ela dvarim chusim v'niklim v'adi. These are all lowly things which are not very important. So if we're just looking at the body, the things that the body is involved in is just very lowly and mundane. Yes?
The body by itself cannot act without a seichel. Right? The seichel is the one that directs the body, physical.
Right.
Being to do something.
Right, but you see that animals who don't have seichel, there's three levels of the soul. There's a nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Well, we're saying spiritual here. I'm emphasizing neshama, which is the part of the soul which wants to get close to Hashem. Right. So animals don't have that, but animals have something which is called a nefesh, which I think some farms say is really even almost physical, which we share with animals. And the nefesh is the life force, which is the instinct of the animal. So there is a life force in animals that they have to do things, but they don't have that higher level seichel. So you see animals, they have a lower level, I don't want to even call it an intellect. They have instincts that they have to eat, they have to sleep, they have to reproduce. So that aspect of them is just a lowly thing, and we share that. We have the same thing. The only difference is that we also have that higher level where we can go against our instincts and do that. But if you just go on that lower level, then the whole life is just, very hevel havalim, nothingness, meaningless. What's the point? So also, also just as an aside, we have to work for a living. You don't have a choice, but it's a curse. Adam was cursed. So I had a Rebbe who made a point once. Some people, they put their whole lives in just their livelihood. That's like their whole focus and everything that they do, and you're putting your whole life into a curse. You have to obviously make a living, but it's really supposed to be a means to, attain spirituality. Okay, Kol Shel Davar. But the main thing, what he's adding here that we didn't learn last week, is that the source, we're learning what's the source of the body and the soul. The source of the soul is Hashem's goodness and His light, whereas the source, the spiritual source for the body, is Hashem hiding His light. So everything's created by Hashem, but it's different in how it was created. What's interesting, I don't know how this fits in exactly, but in Derech Hashem he talks about how the source, Hashem also created evil. And he says a similar way to how Hashem created evil. He says He created evil by hiding His goodness. So that's not to say that the body is evil, right? The body is mundane. It's like, whatever. There's such a thing as evil, which is the opposite of good, which is worse than mundane. But it sounds like it's kind of similar the way that Hashem created it, just speaking it out loud, but I don't know the exact differences and everything. Okay. Klalo shel davar, the general principle is kol divrei hagashmius v'teva halas hem choshech v'laor. All of physicality is really darkness and not light. Masha Adam Baruch Hu master padav min olam, that where God hides Himself. Ve'enu meir bo ha'ar kedushaso, and He doesn't shine His light of holiness. Adrab, on the contrary, mancham b'sohu lo darech, He makes it like sohu, like what's the word? Confusion and chaos. B'drachim shvalim eila, with these lowly creatures. However, the spiritual creations, zeh haderech yishkon or panav yisbarach. This is where Hashem's light dwells. Shehu meir lahem b'kedushaso, He shines His holiness on them. B'zeh pashut is obvious. B'teida ata, now you should know. Ki shtayim eila he mostos hanhagaso yisbarach v'sharsha im kol bruav. Now this is also the way that Hashem deals with His creations. Midas hester panim, sometimes Hashem hides Himself. Shehu misalim u'mistater ve'enu megala hadar kvodo. Midas ha'aretz panim, and sometimes Hashem shows Himself. So there's not only this is the source of how Hashem created these beings, but this is also the way that Hashem deals with humanity. Sometimes, right, we learn we're approaching Purim. Hashem dealt with the world with Hester Panim. Hashem appeared to be hidden. Right, you look around the world, evil things happen. It appears that Hashem is hidden. And then we have other times in Jewish history, the leaving of Egypt, when we had the temple in Jerusalem, it was very clear to see Hashem. So these are the two ways that Hashem deals with the world. And also, this is the method that Hashem created the different things, because we learned that everything which is created in the world has a spiritual source. We're not just like here detached. We have like chains and strings connecting us to the spiritual source. And the way He created the soul, we're learning, is different than the way He created the body. The way He created the soul is through a direct goodness and holiness. The way He created the body is through hiding Himself, and it's a mundane creation which we share with the animals. I think we'll stop here. We're getting Kabbalistic.